Another day of wandering is over. There is silence within me, and the night is silent around me. The wind glides softly over the dunes and ripples the sand on their slopes. In the narrow circle of the firelight, I can see Zaid's figure busy over his pots and pans, our saddlebags lying there nearby where we tossed them when we made camp for the night, and our saddles with their high wooden pommels. A little beyond, already melting into the darkness, the crouching bodies of the two dromedaries, tired after the long march, their necks stretched on the sand, and still farther beyond, only faintly visible under the starlight, but as near to you as your own heartbeat, the empty desert. There are many more beautiful landscapes in the world, but none, I think, that can shape man's spirit in so sovereign a way. In its hardness and sparseness, the desert strips our desire to comprehend life of all subterfuges, of all the manifold delusions with which a more bountiful nature may entrap man's mind, and cause him to project his own imageries into the world around him. The desert is bare and clean, and knows no compromise. It sweeps out of the heart of man all the lovely fantasies that could be used as a masquerade for wishful thinking, and thus makes him free to surrender himself to an absolute that has no image, the farthest of all that is far, and yet the nearest of all that is near. Ever since man began to think, the desert has been the cradle of all his beliefs in one God. True, even in softer environments and more favorable climes have men had, time and again, an inkling of his existence and oneness, as, for instance, in the ancient Greek concept of Moira, the indefinable power behind and above the Olympian gods. But such concepts were never more than the outcome of a vague feeling, a divining rather than certain knowledge, until the knowledge broke forth with dazzling certainty to men of the desert, and from out of the desert. It was from a burning thorn bush in the desert of Midian that the voice of God rang out to Moses. It was in the wilderness of the Judean desert that Jesus received the message of the kingdom of God, and it was in the cave of Hira in the desert hills near Mecca that the first call came to Muhammad of Arabia. It came to him in that narrow, dry gorge between rocky hills, that naked valley burnt by desert sun, an all-embracing yes to life, both of the spirit and of the flesh, the call that was destined to give form and a purpose to a formless nation of tribes, and through it to spread within a few decades, like a flame and a promise, westward as far as the Atlantic Ocean and eastward to the Great Wall of China, destined to remain a great spiritual power to this day, more than 13 centuries later, outliving all political decay, outlasting even the great civilization which it brought into being, the call that came to the prophet of Arabia. I sleep and I awake. I think of the days that have passed and yet are not dead, and sleep again and dream, and awake again and sit up, dream and remembrance flowing gently together in the half-light of my awakening. The night is near to morning. The fire has died down entirely. Rolled in his blanket sleeps Zaid. Our dromedaries lie motionless like two mounds of earth. The stars are still visible. And you might think there is still time to sleep, but low on the eastern sky there appears, palely born out of the darkness, a faint streak of light above another, darker streak that lies over the horizon, twin heralds of dawn, time of the morning prayer. Obliquely over me I see the morning star, which the Arabs call Az-Zuhra, the shining one. If you ask them about it, they will tell you that the shining one was once a woman. There were once two angels, Harut and Marut, who forgot to be humble, as it behooves angels to be, and boasted of their invincible purity. We are made of light. We are above all sin and desire, unlike the weak sons of man, sons of a mother's dark womb. But they forgot that their purity had not come from their own strength, for they were pure only because they knew no desire, and had never been called upon to resist it. Their arrogance displeased the Lord, and he said to them, "Go down to earth and stand your test there." The proud angels went down to earth and wandered, clothed in human bodies, among the sons of man, and on the very first night they came upon a woman whose beauty was so great that people called her the Shining One. When two angels looked at her with the human eyes and feelings they now had, they became confused, and just as if they had been sons of man, the desire to possess her arose in them. Each one of them said to her, "Be willing unto me." But the Shining One answered, "There is a man to whom I belong. If you want me, you must free me of him." And they slew the man, and with the unjustly spilt blood still on their hands they satisfied their burning lust with the woman. But as soon as the desire left them, the two erstwhile angels became aware that on their first night on earth they had sinned twofold, in murder and fornication, and that there had been no sense in their pride, And the Lord said, "Choose between punishment in this world and punishment in the hereafter." In their bitter remorse, the fallen angels chose punishment in this world, and the Lord ordained that they be suspended on chains between heaven and earth, and remain thus suspended until the day of judgment, as a warning to angels and men that all virtue destroys itself if it loses humility. But as no human eye can see angels, God changed the Shining One into a star in the heavens so that people might always see her, and, remembering her story, remember the fate of Harut and Marut. The outline of this legend is much older than Islam. It seems to have originated in one of the many myths which the ancient Semites wove around their goddess Ishtar, the Grecian Aphrodite of later days, both of whom were identified with the planet we now call Venus. But in the form in which I heard it, the story of Harut in the form in which I heard it, the story of Harut and Marut is a typical creation of the Muslim mind, an illustration of the idea that abstract purity or freedom from sin can have no moral meaning so long as it is based on a mere absence of urges and desires. For it is not the recurrent necessity of choosing between right and wrong the premise of all morality. Poor Harut and Marut did not know this, because as angels they had never been exposed to temptation. They had considered themselves pure and morally far above man, not realizing that the denial of the legitimacy of bodily urges would indirectly imply a denial of all moral value in human endeavors. For it is only the presence of urges, temptations, and conflicts, the possibility of choice, which makes man, and him alone, into a moral being, a being endowed with a soul. It is on the basis of this conception that Islam, alone among all higher religions, regards the soul of man as one aspect of his personality, and not as an independent phenomenon in its own right. Consequently, to the Muslim, man's spiritual growth is inextricably bound up with all the other aspects of his nature. Physical urges are an integral part of this nature, not the result of an original sin, a concept foreign to the ethics of Islam, but positive God-given forces to be accepted and sensibly used as such. Hence, the problem for man is not how to suppress the demands of his body, but rather how to coordinate them with the demands of his spirit in such a way that life might become full and righteous. The root of this almost monastic life assertion is to be found in the Islamic view that man's original nature is essentially good, contrary to the Christian idea that man is born sinful, or the teaching of Hinduism that he is originally low and impure and must painfully stagger through a long chain of incarnations toward the ultimate goal of perfection. The Quran says, "Verily, we create man in a perfect state, a state of purity that may be destroyed only by subsequent wrong behavior, and thereupon we reduce him to the lowest of low, with the exception of those who have faith in God and do good works."